Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Fantasy 420, where today we are going to be continuing our free agency winners and losers series with our 2019 wide receiver free agency losers. So we're going to be discussing 5 wide receivers whose 2019 fantasy values were hurt by the insanely active free agency period. There's still a lot of offseason to go, obviously, with injuries, preseason games, etc. But I believe there are some conclusions to be made at the positions, respectively. And we will be starting with player number 5 today and ending with player number 1 being the most hurt player from the offseason. I believe 5 was still hurt a decent amount, but 1 was hurt the most, I believe. So without further ado, we will start with number 5 on the list, who's a combination of 2 players, Courtland Sutton and Deshaun Hamilton. More though Courtland Sutton, I believe, as most people would be picking him higher in fantasy leagues. And this is not as bad for Emmanuel Sanders, as he's obviously a little bit older, coming off that Achilles injury, somebody we're probably going to fade once NFL real season drafts start. These guys are age 23 for Sutton and 24 for Deshaun Hamilton, respectively, and they looked pretty good as rookies last year, especially Sutton. And I do want to buy into those 2 players as fantasy assets, but John Elway hasn't really had success finding a quarterback since Peyton Manning has left, even though he's put a lot of assets into replacements. Case Keenum was their star free agent acquisition last year. Obviously didn't really perform so well, so they traded him to Washington for a 6th round pick, and they traded away Keenum and a 7th to get that pick. And their replacement for Keenum is supposedly going to be Joe Flacco, who is 34 years old, and they traded a 4th round pick, and in my opinion, not a really great move. He might be an above average real life quarterback, but he definitely hasn't tilted the fantasy meters in a while, so not really feeling it. I just hope they do draft a quarterback this year in the 1st round. That's somebody that Flacco can mentor, and then I can be more into those guys in future seasons. I'm still willing to buy into Sutton. It's just going to be depending the price, but I'm just not really buying into Denver's array of quarterback decisions they've made recently. So not really a huge fan of Joe Flacco at 34, changing teams, and probably fading those 2 guys to a certain extent. Number 4 on the list is going to be Cooper Kupp. I've been down on him all offseason. He tore his ACL in Game 8 of last season, so November, pretty late in the season. And Sean McVay has said he is, quote-unquote, on track to be ready for training camp, which means they're supposedly going to roll him out week 1. I do know he's 25 years old. He's more of a route runner and not a speed guy, and if he is healthy, you do have to bring him back to a certain extent. I just don't like the supposed urgency. They have a really good core there with Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Josh Reynolds playing really well last year, looked good filling in. I'd be a little bit more excited to buy into Kupp if I feel like we were keeping him a little bit at bay, resting him, making sure he's fine rather than pushing him to be back week 1. I just think with that team being so loaded in the wide receiver core, not even talking about tight ends, I think he's probably going to be their 4th receiver this year. Best scenario is going to be their 3, and I just think that if they rush him back and he re-injures himself, then that's obviously the worst case scenario. So not really a big fan of the news for Cooper Kupp in the offseason. Sorry about that. Just didn't want to cough. Obviously, I've been sick recently. The 3rd name I'm going to look into is T.Y. Hilton. The team obviously signed Devin Funchess to a very highly publicized 1 year, $13 million prove-it deal in the offseason. TY is 5 feet 9 inches tall, and Devin Funchess and Eric Ebron are both 6 feet 4 inches tall. So that does have to scare you for TY's red zone chances and opportunities. They're going to obviously try to look for those bigger bodies when they're close to the end zone and need to cram it in. He's already an inconsistent player, and then you add in a free agent for $13 million who's playing the same position. It is a cause for concern. He is a lot younger, and TY will be hitting 30 this year, that magic point in football careers where some players more than often start to fall off. So, and assuming Jacksonville improves, Tennessee, Houston, and Indy is going to be a crazy tough division, possibly the best in football. So it's going to be hard for them to repeat last year, getting a lot of those same things rolling their way. And you also got a healthy top flight Andrew Luck. If he were to get hurt again, that would obviously really hurt TY's value. So I'm going to put TY at number 3 based on Funchess and possibly or probably a little bit of regression from the team. Number 2 name is going to be Antonio Brown. I still love him this year, but I do think he did take a hit. 4 40-yard touchdowns, tied for first in the league with Tyreek Hill, and 15 touchdowns, number 1 in the league, the second being 2 players at 13 touchdowns. That's pretty dominant, and it's going to be very hard for him to repeat those numbers given a new scenery, new quarterback, new offensive game plan, coach, etc. I really like David Carr. I think he's a good quarterback and he's very efficient, but Ben just had that chemistry and took risks bombing it to AB, and that chemistry with Carr is going to need to develop. Tyrell Williams was also a really nice signing in the offseason, but he will obviously see more double teams than ever. He doesn't have Juju Smith-Schuster, Connor, Le'Veon Bell, or that run game, Vance McDonald, etc., to take all the pressure off of him. I do think he's going to see a lot of targets, but it's just going to be less explosion and touchdowns. So I do have to rank Antonio Brown there. And then finally, number 1 name, unfortunately, is going to be Tyreek Hill. Obviously, this is entirely based on the conclusion of an alleged juvenile battery case last month. But given his past assault guilty plea when he was in college, I believe even if he's innocent, I don't see him getting less than a 6-game suspension like Ezekiel Elliott got for a personal conduct violation. Also, the more the evidence, the worse the suspension gets. So this could be up to a year, as we've seen with Ray Rice, if they actually do have some video. We also saw with Adrian Peterson, when his child had markings, he got an extremely long suspension. So if this is something like that, it's only going to get worse. It's not going to be, I think it's 6 is best case scenario. I mean, I just don't think 0 is going to happen. It's going to be a suspension of some sort. So, and the Chiefs' history as a team, they released Kareem Hunt last year, a top 10 running back. So I don't know. It's he could go to being literally the number 1 wide receiver overall last year to not even being on the team. It's an absolute windfall. So it's going to be hard to comment, as it is a very delicate matter. I obviously don't want to jump to conclusions too much, but if he did something wrong, he obviously needs to be suspended, and it's just a very hard thing to comment on in general in fantasy sports. So obviously, no matter what, with Kareem Hunt for sure released and not knowing what's going to happen with Tyreek, if he receives some sort of suspension, it's just really devastating losses for an exciting young team in general. And this is going to hurt him, Pat Mahomes, Kelsey's going to get doubled. It's just they're going to lose games earlier on in the season it's just not going to be very good for the Chiefs in general. Snowball effect. So those are my 5 names for today. Like I always say, I don't really like going over the losers, but just like the winners, there are losers in every offseason, so it's important to highlight those as well. I'll leave you links to my previous loser videos that I've done in the last week or so, and I'll be back tomorrow with another video. As always, everybody, take it easy, have a great afternoon, and I'll see you then.